Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech, protected.
Local news, politics, business, sports, arts, music. Mike and Marty on the beat. Mike and Marty. Mike and Marty.
Good morning, Bellows Falls, Keene, and Rockingham. It's April 19th. This is Mike and Marty on the feed. We're here with Sean Roberts today. Thanks for coming back, Sean. We're going to be talking about his upcoming play coming up next week called Through the Eyes of Kern. And we'll find out what Kern is or who Kern is. Mm-hmm. But first, local events with Marty.
Local events. So at the Bellows Falls Opera House, starting Thursday night, am I right? No, Friday night. Friday night. Super Mario Bros.
Friday.
And it runs for like 3 weeks, I think. So Super Mario Bros. 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
For some reason I thought it was 3. I never played Mario. Is that it's a
Really?
video game? Yeah, yeah. Now they made it into a movie. I guess people are super excited.
No science
about it.
fiction, no Mario.
I know.
No Star Trek.
I haven't lived.
You have.
I know. Classic movie on Wednesday night tonight is called The Way. It is Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez. It is sponsored by, I love it when you guys do this, A Nani Mouse. Sounds like a good movie. Is it something that you've heard of?
No.
It's Charlie Sheen goes to pick up his son that's deceased. His son was over doing this like pilgrimage walk. I guess that's what the way is. And he decides to do the walk himself, and he learns a lot along the way.
Ah.
Smells Like Nirvana will be coming to the Opera House May 18th. Obviously, they're a Nirvana cover band. Tickets are available at the Opera House. It is being sponsored by Cider Productions and PK's. So bringing some interesting music to Bellows Falls. If you're looking for something to do on Saturday, May 6th, you can help keep BF beautiful with a Green Up Day. I don't know the location of where everyone's meeting. Last year, everyone met at the Waypoint Center, so that would be my guess. They're going to do they have a whole list of things to do. Last year, I think everyone had a really good time. There were some folks that brought their kids, and they got assignments, and it was like painting and picking up trash and doing some gardens, and then there's a potluck lunch they serve you at the end, so it's a good family community building day.
Is that the traditional Vermont Green Up Day? Because I know it's right at the very beginning of May.
I think so, because normally, usually we'd have Amy Howlett on about this time, talking about it and bringing the bags and showing the where they could pick up the bags. I think you can get the bags at the town hall and all that stuff. So I think it is traditionally the Green Up Day. Happening at the Country Club on Thursday night, the Bellows Falls Chamber of Commerce is honoring community rock stars. So the community rock stars that they'll be honoring on Thursday night, there's 3 individuals. There's Amanda Reed, Betsy Thurston, and Wanda Salter. And there's 3 businesses / organizations. So Kern Hatton Homes residential staff is being honored, Greater Falls Pharmacy employees are being honored, and the Bellows Falls Rotary Club. It's a $25 per person event. There's food. There's just lots of fun. Community connections. You get to meet with people. We've been inside in winter too long, so it's a good time to get out.
It's supposed to be a nice day too.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be sunny
and at
tomorrow.
the Country Club, you have the beautiful deck, and it's just a great setting. And then finally, my last event is make sure that you are marking your calendar and getting ready for the Bellows Falls Festival happening on June 10th down at the Waypoint Center, an actual all-day long music festival with local artists, artists from the Northampton area, the Mammals and Sarah Borges, and just food trucks, beer vendor. What more could you want?
Yep.
I don't know. But first, we have a production coming up next weekend. Through Cerns Eyes.
Yes.
That we need to backload the audience on the story.
Yeah, because it's an original script, so because
Written
of
by
that-
you.
Yeah, back in
Yeah.
2012, and I've done it a couple times. Once at a small community theater, once at the Claremont
Oh.
Opera House, and then this is
Shit,
the third
okay.
time that it's been performed. But it's been a different version of the play each time, and this is now the one based on the book that I wrote during the COVID lockdown. So I would say it's the final version of the play. Since,
It's an evolving project. But
Yeah,
you want to
yeah.
make it better every time, right? So
Yes.
this is great.
Yeah, and the general story, so then that way audience out there can know what they're coming to see
Yeah.
beforehand, so trying to get you a little bit excited about it. It's about a young girl, she's about 14 years old, her name is Erica, and she's moving into a new house with her stepfather and her older sister. And they're moving into this house. Her mother has died of cancer. And they're trying to move on with their lives. And the reason why she lives with her stepfather is because her biological father is not really in the mix anymore. And the stepfather really cares about the family. And so he's holding on to all of them, and they're moving on with their lives. And they move into this house out in the woods. And on the first day that they're there, the stepfather and sister go off to go get some groceries, and she and her dog Ian go off into the woods to go just explore the land that they have around their house. And while she's out there, she ends up finding her way into a fairy world, which gets talked about as Tirnanog, which is just a term for like the fairy realm. And she ends up meeting this dwarf named Geosalad, and he brings Erica home to meet his husband Flint, who is also a dwarf. And they cook them food, and they sing a song for them, and they go to bed. And then when they wake up in the morning, they're trying to figure out how to get Erica home. And Ian, who is the dog, now that they're in this fairy world, has the ability to speak. And while in the dwarf's home, he actually makes a wish to be able to climb this ladder because there's this interesting smell that he wants to go and inspect. And when he makes the wish, he acquires the ability like to have thumbs and move around more like a human and everything. And so he becomes this humanoid version of the dog. And so then the next day they go to this hawthorn grove because that's where this being named Kern sometimes takes a stop in his travels and everything. And so they meet some other good fairies and some bad fairies, and then they meet Kern. And Kern is the titular character through Cerns Eyes, and he's based off of an old Celtic god named Cernunnos that has a few depictions throughout history. One on a cauldron called the Gunderstrup cauldron, and it was found in Denmark, but was more than likely made by Celtic or Thracian smiths. And Thrace is kind of where, if we think of like where Bulgaria is, or we think about some of Asia Minor is, those are some of like that geographical location is kind of where Thrace would have been. And then the Celtic world was really most of Europe and like England when we think about, and the United Kingdom area, all those places. And the artwork on the cauldron seems to be in Thracian silverwork, but the depictions on it are of Celtic style, which is why they're not completely certain which culture, who made it, the origin of it. But they know it wasn't made by people who were living in Denmark at that time. And so that's why it's either Thracian or Celtic style. And the image that we're seeing right now is of Kern himself, the Cernunnos. A man sitting kind of cross-legged. He's got a torque around his neck, which was an ancient Celtic style necklace. He has deer antlers growing from the top of his head. And in one hand, he's holding another torque, which was a symbol of of abundance and wealth inside of a Celtic society. People wore them as almost like a sign of their status. And so the fact that he's holding a torque and wearing a torque shows that he was probably a deity of abundance, of wealth. But then in his other hand, he's holding this horned snake, and he's surrounded by all these animals, which means that, once again, abundance, because, having animals, being able to eat them like that, once again, abundance, but also the wild world. So that's kind of the type of deity that he probably was of abundance and of nature, the wild nature. And that's Cernunnos. And on another pillar, there's a stone image of Cernunnos, which is just his face, and he's got antlers again, but he's got torques dangling from his antlers, which connects him again to that abundance thing, that he was just dangling from himself, this wealth. And so that's Cernunnos. Another image that I have, which is an AI-generated piece of art, shows a man's face, but there's leaves all over it, and so that's one of the images that I have. That's a more modern depiction, if we were going to think about Kern. And he, inside the story, he is kind of the male personification of nature. Which then lends itself to a lot of modern pagan spirituality, where a lot of the time they go into this duality, if it's not truly polytheistic, where there's just a bunch of different deities inside the belief system. A lot of the time there's a duality where there's like the goddess and the god. And then there's all the renditions of the goddess and the god in the polytheistic way of looking at the different gods that exist within their belief system that they might follow. And Cernunnos just represents the masculine parts of nature, and he is trying to bring hope back to his lover, who is Morg, and she is the female personification of nature. She is the mother goddess, if we think about it that way. And he's trying to bring hope back to Morg.
Is that Morg?
Yes, that is Morg. The image that we're seeing now would be Morg. And the other side of her face that we don't see is burnt and scarred because of what humanity has done to nature. So that's going to be like part of her aesthetic in the show. She's been hurt and damaged by humanity, and she's actually trying to create this thing called the appetence, which is a word that means to consume or
Like
great desire. Yep. It has that similarity in that word. And so the appetence represents human consumption. And Morg has given birth to it as to create a physical manifestation of human consumption, because a lot of the time in pagan spirituality, fairies and spirits and things like that end up representing the physical manifestation of
some behavior,
of an idea or a thing, or like a flower or whatever it might be.
That looks like a pretty scary manifestation.
Yes, and it's supposed
It's not
to.
a nice
It's human
little-
consumption.
I was going to
Isn't
say,
that
it's
good?
not like it's a nice little fairy and some wings.
Right.
But
Yeah, if I say human consumption, I don't think most people think like, oh, that's a good thing. Like, unless you're some big corporation, you don't really think human consumption is a good thing. And so she creates this stuff called the appetence, and she unleashes it upon the world to start consuming as much life as it can in order to kind of wipe the slate clean of human life. A very God and Noah's Ark type of story in that sense, just trying to wipe the slate clean. And Kern is thinking that we don't need to destroy all of humanity. We can bring hope to humanity. We need to inspire people to do better. And so he brings this child into the Fey world and finally meets her at the Hawthorn Grove and kind of starts explaining this whole thing of what he needs her for. And she was chosen because she wasn't someone that automatically already cared about the world. So he's choosing her because if I can make someone change, if I can bring this ideology to someone who doesn't already care about this, then maybe that will then show more
More
that it's
that there's
possible.
hope.
Right, that
Yes.
there's hope.
Yeah.
Which is part of the title of the book, Through Cerns Eyes, The Awe of Hope. And so he tries to bring Erica to Morg. Erica is very scared of Morg because when she finally sees her, Morg is the Morrigan inside of the Celtic belief system of the Tuatha De Danann. And they are the Irish, what's referred to mythology, but I'm not a huge fan of that word being used when
Yeah.
referring to a different type of belief system, because as much as the first definition of mythology refers to like traditional stories, the second definition of mythology, of myth, is a believed in but false thing.
Right.
And people often, when referring to Christian belief systems, call it a religion. But when they talk about a polytheistic ancient belief system, they call it a myth, a mythology, which then gets connected to the word myth, which gets connected to the second definition of it, to think of it as false, even though, you know, people believe in it and there's no proof that either one is more true than the other. And so I'm not a huge fan of the word mythology being used, but that's often how it's referred to, as Irish belief systems. Their old polytheistic beliefs were the Tuatha De Danann, and she was a goddess inside of that represented war and battle, but she was also someone who could foretell things to come, and she would foretell when someone's going to die. Like there's inside of the stories of the Tuatha De Danann, she kind of foretold the death of heroes and whatnot, and crows were often a symbol of hers, and she was thought of as like the crows over a battlefield, just watching, waiting for there to be the dead. Right, food, the dead, yeah. And so the goddess has taken on this manifestation, this war goddess, because of her current outlook on how she's going to be treating humanity. And so Kern brings Erica there to try to bring hope to her. And there's another being inside of the story that's a Wendigo, which is an old spirit inside of Native American beliefs that has to do with starvation and cannibalism. It's a spirit that, because they weren't a fan of cannibalism, like most societies don't like the idea of cannibalism, because you know, it's hard to keep a society going if everybody's eating each other. And
That's true.
yeah, and so that's like, that's why you would make such a like kind of a stigma of that, is because you're like, we don't want people eating each other. I know it sounds silly to think of it that way, but on a societal level, it's just like religion. We come up with
It's
this
one of those
thing.
taboos that's
Right.
almost universal.
Right. We need to make these certain rules that maybe don't have a true thing that like this is a punishment if you do it type of thing. So we have to come up with this concept of a punishment of why you shouldn't do that thing, and that's a societal thing that we do. And so the Wendigo is this spirit that would possess someone who is starving and make them eventually eat other people. And it becomes ravenous, and it's never full, and they're usually depicted at these gaunt, very bone dry people, and lips curled back, and they're always showing their teeth, and they're always hungry. And
Is there a Wendigo in the play?
Yep. Yeah, there's a Wendigo in the play.
I'm just thinking the characters and the costuming.
This is going to be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
And so the Wendigo is sort of helping the appetants because it wants the dead bodies that will be in the wake of all of humanity being taken out. And then Erica meets the Wendigo, and her dog fights it, and she finds out things about the Wendigo that has to do with her own personal life. There's a connection between her and the Wendigo. And I don't want to say too much
Right,
that
we
like
don't-
gives
right.
the
We don't
full
want to do a
We don't
spoiler.
wanna give the whole story.
Right.
but I'm trying to just talk about things that will tease and interest the audience. And so Erica tries to help against the appetants, and the main messages inside of the story include LGBTQIA plus inclusion, and that involves Erica herself, like her character is part of the queer community, and but I don't want to get into how. I would like people to come to the show and learn through that. And then there's the two dwarves who are lovers, and the way I care about it is through the normalization of it, rather than trying to say that I'm trying to make a huge message about it and like saying I'm trying to get in your face about it. It's more like Erica meets the dwarf, and he introduces her to his husband, and there's no big deal about it. It's just, this is my husband, the end, and let's move on with the rest of our evening together. And that normalization is part of Bertolt Brechtian style theater of defamiliarization, familiarization, where I take something that someone might think of as strange inside of society, and you make it the norm within the story. So then the person sees it from that other point of view and says like, oh, yeah, maybe my current outlook, which might be a little bit opposed to that, can now look at that and say that's no different than the normal thing that I already believe in or view as an okay thing. And so that's part of the messaging inside of the stories, the normalization of LGBTQIA+, rather than trying to think of it as this battle between one and the other, just trying to say like, just everybody be okay with each other. And then environmentalism is another big part, because of the goddess represents the earth, we're polluting it and everything.
And consumption.
Right, and how it's going to destroy us. Like our own consumption is going to eat us alive. And
The Wendigo.
the Wendigo, the Appetins,
See,
and
I'm
then
getting it.
yeah. And then Kern is hope. Kern is that glimmer of hope that we have. It's the part of me, like when I wrote Kern, all of his dialogue is in poetry, like it all rhymes, everything that he says, and he represents this idealistic way of looking at the world, this hope that you can be good and you can be good, and we all have this chance that we can take. He doesn't necessarily have to believe in it, and you never really find out in the story whether he like truly believes that everybody is good, but he has that hope that we can be good, and he will fight for that to the end, like regardless of if he is a realist in the end or not. And those two concepts conflict with one another. The realistic, nihilistic consumption of the Appetins and Morgan, the Wendigo, and then the idealistic hope of Kern, and that's kind of the conflict in the story. And it touches on animal rights as well, though, because we find out that Ian came from a breeder, but not like a puppy mill. We find out that he grew up in a puppy mill, and those are not good things. I will always be a proponent of saying like rescue, adopt, don't buy pets, because if you buy pets, you're feeding into a life product. It's tough for someone to truly put everything they can and love into a life that they know is a product in the end, that they're trying to get as much money out as possible. I need to put this much money in order to get this much. If I put too much care and money in, I'm losing value. So it's difficult.
That's a tough one.
Right, and so that's why I will always say like that's the animal rights component, and then there's child abuse, like the topic of child abuse gets brought up inside of the story.
I think we're getting low on time. I forgot to start my timer.
Me too.
We both did. Yeah, 1 minute.
minute.
So where and
okay.
when? I know we got so involved. Where and when? to
Next
play?
weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the 27th, 28th, 29th, and 30th. 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and 2 o'clock on Sunday. And we're actually going to have a big Q&A after the show on Sunday, including a few companies that are involved in our production that are actually getting all of our ticket sales from the Sunday show.
Nice. And this is at Main Street Arts in Saxons River.
Yep.
And I think that's all
And I
we
think
have
that's
time
it.
for.
We're
Yeah,
sort
that
of
went quick.
out
Okay.
of time. Thank you.
Bye,
We'll see you
Keith.
next week.
Thank you.
That was
That was
great.
good.
Local news, politics, business, sports, arts, music. Mike and Mike.